Good evening, and thank you for joining us for CBS News Detroit at 7. We are streaming on the CBS News app and on Pluto TV. I'm Shayna Humphreys, and tonight, in honor of Black History Month, we're getting a history lesson from a couple of experts on Black history in Detroit. We start with a look back at the Great Migration, when millions of Black Americans left the South and moved up to northern cities in the early 20th century. In Detroit, it eventually led to the creation of Paradise Valley, a Black business and entertainment district that was around from the 1920s through the 50s. For more on that, here's the official historian for the city of Detroit, Jamon Jordan.
African Americans, as they began leaving the South during what is known as the Great Migration from 1910 to roughly 1970, in 1910, 95% of African Americans lived in a southern state. By 1970, 55% of African Americans lived somewhere other than a southern state. We call that time period the Great Migration. And a significant number of African Americans moved to the city of Detroit during that time. In fact, between 1910 and 1920, Detroit's African American community grows 600%. And so, because of housing discrimination, most African Americans live in the Lower East Side in the neighborhood known as Black Bottom. Because African Americans are making pretty good wages in comparison to sharecropping down south and tenant farming, many of them working at Ford and other plants, they're able to have a living wage. Many of them, having this living wage, begin to open up businesses. Many of them who may not open up their own businesses become customers of other Black businesses. Those Black businesses become a centered area just north of Black Bottom known as Paradise Valley. Paradise Valley would become the Black business and entertainment district in the city of Detroit from the 1920s until the 1950s. The area originates roughly in the area where Ford Field, Comerica Park, the 36th District Court is, and where 75 Freeway is today, but that was Hastings Street at that time. That area will have 350 Black-owned businesses either in that section or very close to that section. And we call that the Paradise Valley period and the Paradise Valley area. Hotels, clubs, restaurants, stores, shops, all the types of businesses that African Americans would need, including also churches, civic organizations, doctors' offices, and attorneys, all of them are stationed either in or close to that area known as Paradise Valley. This will be a Black business district. However, in 1949, the federal government passed the National Housing Act of 1949, giving cities money to do urban renewal. African Americans in the city of Detroit call this urban renewal Negro removal because it is their neighborhoods that are first destroyed and are destroyed most thoroughly. Black Bottom begins being destroyed starting in 1949, and then when the federal government passed the Interstate Highway Act of 1956, they began building the I-375 and I-75 freeway. The mayor at the time is Mayor Albert Cobo, who's run on a platform of segregation. He uses the money to begin tearing down Paradise Valley. Black Bottom is mostly all gone by this point, and Hastings Street will turn into a freeway. The land will be taken by eminent domain or sold. In fact, the owners are forced to sell so that the land can be redeveloped. African Americans will lose this Black business district, and because of property segregation, they won't be able to create a new one somewhere else in the city. But the legacy of Paradise Valley will live on because the music history, the business acumen will pass on to the next generation, and a large part of what will become Motown comes from that legacy of Paradise Valley.
And joining us now is Jamon Jordan, the first official historian for the city of Detroit. Jamon, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And that was a wonderful piece you just put together. People may have heard of Black Bottom or of Paradise Valley, but it's also a story that we're not all familiar with. Do you think people know enough about the rich history that is still right around us? You mentioned this is right by Ford Field.
That's correct. Yeah, I think most people don't know. People are knowing more than they knew 10 years ago, but still most people don't know about this history. It's really rich history in the Lower East Side of the city of Detroit. Detroit is a business center for African Americans. Of course, it's a job center. Most people know that thousands of African Americans came to the city of Detroit to work in the auto plants.
Right.
But they don't know that they established their own business district, and they don't know that it was an entertainment district as well, and that big band and blues and performers, singers, dancers, comedians were performing in this area. And so Detroit is an entertainment center. People know about Harlem. They may know about even Chicago, but they don't know that Detroit was right there with those other places and at that high level. But the fact that it got destroyed has obscured a lot of that history.
And you know, so many of the stories that we do here tend to be around pain and the struggle of Black Americans. But in recent years, we are starting to learn a little bit more. I think especially in the last couple of years, thanks to pop culture, people have started to hear about Black Wall Street over in Oklahoma. You mentioned Harlem, Chicago.
That's right.
But Detroit's a much bigger city with a very rich history. Why do you think it's so important that people do know about these amazing, beautiful things that were happening in addition to the struggle?
Yeah, so people need to know that, because what they ought to know is that many times when Detroit is depicted, particularly African-American history in Detroit is depicted, it is depicted as something that was problematic. But they don't know about this business enterprises that African-Americans, hundreds of them, were created, developed by African-Americans who came to the city of Detroit. And so, because so much negative history has come out about the city of Detroit and about African Americans, it is important for us to tell this other part of the story, that African Americans were developing businesses in downtown Detroit. We think of downtown Detroit's development today. There's a lot of development that's happened in the last few years. But back in the 20s and 30s, for African Americans to develop 350 Black-owned businesses at a time when segregation was still going on, discrimination, they were still able to be that successful. That's an important story to tell.
It's incredible. And those legacies still live today.
That's right.
You mentioned in that piece that Motown was born out of Paradise Valley. How is that?
Yeah, so it's very important. So many of the performers there were jazz performers, big band performers. But of course the big band era began to wane after World War II. So people weren't playing big bands anymore. Jazz was going through a transition. So these performers had to find gigs. They had to find jobs. And as blues, R&B, and soul became important, they began to work in those places. So when Motown starts in 1959 and the Funk Brothers become the backup band for most of the performers, those are big band folks. Those are folks who used to play in the big bands, or they're people who learned from big band folks. Maurice King becomes the music director at Motown. He was a big band performer in Paradise Valley at the Flame Show Bar for years before he got hired at Motown. Motown is the child of Paradise Valley.
And I mean, talk about the importance of knowing your roots. We hear influences from Motown today on the radio. You know, you can't explain the influence. It's huge. Explain that connection, like how all of these stories are still affecting us day to day today.
That's right. So a lot of people who are younger than the generation after me have forgotten about Motown. But Marvin Gaye and the Temptations and the Jackson 5 and Stevie Wonder
timeless.
And the Supremes and Temptations, their legacy has gone down to the groups that exist today, the musicians that exist today, the performers that exist today. There is a direct line that you can draw through the Supremes to later female groups like TLC and Destiny's Child. And so, of course, out of Destiny's Child, you have one of the most famous performers in the world, Beyonce. But there probably would be no Destiny's Child being that famous had it not, that ground not been broken by the Supremes. But the Supremes exist because of this earlier history in the city of Detroit, this earlier performance history in the city of Detroit in Paradise Valley.
Yeah. How do you think that this history, these stories, can impact the future? Doesn't it make a difference when people here today understand that it wasn't always a struggle? It wasn't always, you know, rough parts of the cities, highways being built, displacing residents. There was something wonderful happening here. Yeah,
one of the things that everybody needs to understand is that African Americans created culture, they created businesses, they created institutions, and that those institutions have left legacies. In some cases, those institutions are still with us, but in some cases, they're not with us, but their legacy is still with us. That helps to pave the way for later institutions and later institution builders. So there are people who are business folks, performers, musicians, artists today who can draw from the energy that was created decades ago in Paradise Valley.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with here today. I know you're going to sit tight. Jamon will be back with us later in the show, and I want to talk more about how we can all learn more about these legacies that we maybe haven't heard about before. But when we return, we will be joined by President and Executive Director of the Detroit River Project, Kimberly Simmons. Stay with us.
Black History is a time to celebrate. It's a time to let all of America know exactly what we bring to the table. It is a celebration of remembering everything that we've done to contribute to this great nation. So you can talk about slavery, you can talk about post-slavery. You know, I come from sharecroppers in North Carolina, and for me to be here today is great. It's funny, in more than 40 years of this industry, I've got about maybe 6 stops I've made where I was the first African American to either do sports Monday through Friday, even part of a sports department. So being a part of that history is encouraging, because there are young people who follow in my footsteps and will do bigger and better things.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Macomb County. Hi, we're CBS News Detroit, but we don't just cover the news here. We're also here, and everywhere in between. You know, the places you live, work, and play in Southeast Michigan. We're talking less of this, and more of the stories that actually matter to you.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock.
That's right, local news just found a home in your neighborhood. We're CBS News Detroit, live, streaming, and on demand. Nice to meet you. CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Wayne County. CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Monroe County.
CBS News Detroit, the stories you care about.
Live, streaming, and on demand. We're on your block, around the clock.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We live here. We work here.
From North Branch to Southgate.
East Point to Westland.
Wherever you live, we're here for you.
Making a difference in your neighborhood.
CBS News Detroit, live, streaming, and on demand. Building a better newscast, one story at a time.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Oakland County. It's here, the new CBS News Detroit.
Covering every corner of our community.
With experienced journalists, uncovering the stories that truly matter to you.
Making a difference in your neighborhood.
And weather experts, always looking ahead to prepare you for what's next. Live, streaming, and on demand, with more hours of local news coming soon.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it, right here on CBS News Detroit.
Weekdays at 5, 6, and 11, and streaming live.
Black History Month means a great deal to me because it's a reminder of our history in this nation, and it's also a reminder of how far we've come. I think it gives us all a unique opportunity, not only myself, but society at large, to continue to learn about the accomplishments African Americans made on this country. And I think if we continue to learn about African American history, it'll make this country a much better place.
Tonight we'll be taking a look at Black history in Detroit, going back to the early 1900s. We're about to tell you about an ongoing project in the city that aims to shed light on the past in order to enlighten the future. But first, we will take a quick trip across the country to the Sojourner Truth African Heritage Museum in Sacramento, where they're celebrating Black history around the world. Here's KOVR's Ashley Sharp.
Through the eyes of a teenager, it's a fresh look at thousands of years of Black history.
So this is Harriet Tubman, and then this is the Sojourner Truth, and this is Frederick Douglass.
Dating all the way back to a 14th century African emperor.
Mansa Musa goes down to be one of the richest people in history, and he's not really talked about.
To the 20th century, when in the Great Migration, 6 million Black people moved north.
When they would migrate, they would use this book right here, called the Green Book, and that helped African Americans navigate to know what hotels to go to, what restaurants to go to, and which ones not to go to.
We got our history lesson from a student turned tour guide.
Did you know that the first cowboys were black?
At 18 years old, Nasera McDaniels Keys says, unlike the pages of a textbook, here, history comes to life.
But most of the times within like the school systems, it's always taught like African American history starts with like slavery. But here at the Sojourner Truth Museum, we teach others that's not true.
It's about learning what's not taught in school, including Sacramento's own piece of Black history, the Oak Park home turned Dunlap's dining room.
The first African American restaurant in Sacramento.
And of course, history about its namesake, abolitionist Sojourner Truth.
So that would have been a replica dress of what she would have worn during those times.
Rich heritage on full display. Inventions too, like the cell phone. Black inventor Henry T. Sampson created the world's first.
I really feel like I'm still learning along the way because there's always information out there that you don't know.
And for Nasera, one trip to the Sojourner Truth Museum simply isn't enough.
My biggest takeaway is to come back as much as possible so that you can come and like really take in the information.
Well, there's a project in the city of Detroit dedicated to educating people about the cultural heritage all around us, with an emphasis on the Underground Railroad legacy. Joining us now is President and Executive Director of the Detroit River Project, Kimberly Simmons. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Shannon. I appreciate it.
So we just heard them mention in the story how important it is to educate people about the Black history that is not taught in schools.
Absolutely.
You've got a basic set of a few stories that we all learned in elementary school. There's such a rich history, though, even specifically here in Detroit. What led you to dedicate so much of your life to educating others about this heritage?
Well, first and foremost, I am an Underground Railroad descendant. I am 5th generation. My family has been surrounding the river since 1835. So we're almost at the 190-year mark.
Wow.
They can't seem to get rid of us, so here we are. But the story of freedom and resistance is who I am, my family, it's in the DNA. So I'm also a very big proponent when I travel, and I've traveled a lot, to see and to learn the culture of the places and the spaces that I visit. And because of that, the stories that we have here, as I've advanced in age, I have come to realize that a lot of folks just do not know their stories. The local history here is not taught, I will say, when I was a younger kid. We learned more about the local stories, but now we're more about national and maybe international. But our stories here are big stories. We have big stories to tell. And I talk to kids all the time as an educator, historian, author, and I'm surprised when they say, for example, using the Underground Railroad as a backdrop, name me someone that you know was involved in the Underground Railroad, because everybody seems to know what that is. And of course they come out with Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass.
Right.
However, we have heroes here that people on the other side of the world know about, like George D. Baptiste, William Lambert, Mary Ann Shadd Cary, who is her 200th birthday is this year, so we're celebrating that during the course of this year. To get a reflex from our children to talk about heroes that aren't here, that tells me they don't know that they have heroes amongst, not just that are gone, but amongst us. So I've been one of those people that has been interested in history all my life. Yeah. I went to school and ended up with a business background. As a matter of fact, I was a 20-year banker. But because of my own personal heritage, it's always been a drive of me to tell those stories or talk about freedom and resistance because it's in the DNA. And about 15 years ago, I decided, well, this is what I really should be doing. So here we are.
Yeah. How do you think we got to where we are today? How is it that people on the other side of the world know these names and these stories, and so many of us don't, and we're right here?
Okay, I try to, people ask this question in different forms often. We are a town that grew up as, and I'll just say it, it's not bad, but we're a blue-collar town.
Yeah.
We are leaning now more towards what I would call white collar, but basically we're a town of, we come home in the evening after work, we have supper, we watch a little TV, we go to bed, then we get up and we repeat, and that goes on sometimes 6 days a week, with some people 7.
Yeah.
People that have, generally speaking, with that kind of a, we'll say, mentality, or we don't really consider our daily lives and the people that we interact with and the people that have been here and have gone before us as really important. We consider ourselves kind of run-of-the-mill. Oh, we just go to work and but the people that have lived here surrounding our river, from the indigenous that were here, the French, the British, and of course always the African American has always been here. We're important people. And I guess it's kind of like, you know, maybe your father's a doctor, or your uncle's a lawyer, or your aunt is a CEO of a company, but it's always daddy or auntie or uncle, and we don't realize that they get their names in the paper all the time. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where when you live within it, you don't really understand it. But trust me, our history in this Detroit River region is extremely important to the rest of the world.
Absolutely. We want to talk more about how people can educate themselves more about that history, and we will right after the break when Jamon rejoins us, and we'll have a final roundtable discussion. Stay with us.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Macomb County. Hi, we're CBS News Detroit. But we don't just cover the news here. We're also here, and everywhere in between. You know, the places you live, work, and play in Southeast Michigan. We're talking less of this, and more of the stories that actually matter to you.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock.
That's right. Local news just found a home in your neighborhood. We're CBS News Detroit. Live, streaming, and on demand. Nice to meet you. CBS News Detroit. On your block, around the clock in Wayne County. CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Monroe County.
CBS News Detroit, the stories you care about.
Live, streaming, and on demand. We're on your block, around the clock.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We live here. We work here.
From North Branch to Southgate.
East Point to Westland.
Wherever you live, we're here for you.
Making a difference in your neighborhood.
CBS News Detroit. Live, streaming, and on demand. Building a better newscast, one story at a time.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Oakland County. It's here, the new CBS News Detroit.
Covering every corner of our community.
With experienced journalists, uncovering the stories that truly matter to you.
Making a difference in your neighborhood.
And weather experts, always looking ahead to prepare you for what's next. Live, streaming, and on demand, with more hours of local news coming soon.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it, right here on CBS News Detroit.
Weekdays at 5, 6, and 11, and streaming live.
What Black History Month means to me is taking time out to acknowledge the contributions of my forefathers, my ancestors, and also being inspired by them to pick up that torch and keep it going.
Welcome back. We are joined now by both Kimberly Simmons and Jamon Jordan, and we've been talking about the rich history that we are surrounded by here in Detroit and ways that we can all educate ourselves more. During the commercial break, Kimberly, you were talking about the effort to turn the Detroit River into a UNESCO World Heritage Site. That would be a really big deal.
A huge deal. I've been working on UNESCO World Heritage designation for the river for 15 years. Good, bad, and indifferent. A UNESCO World Heritage Site is a United Nations product. If I were to tell you Eiffel Tower, Grand Canyon, Ellis Island, we all know what that is. Yeah. Okay, well, the Detroit River will be on that list. Awesome. It is awesome. A designation that everyone, you can't send your sign a form and send your $20 in and you get designated. No. There generally is, you have to have grassroots support because it's something that will exist as its own entity. Just like I said, Ellis Island, well, Ellis Island is an island. We'll say the Grand Canyon. Sure. It becomes a place that we'll call it protected, but you can't do, it's there. So you're supposed to be celebrating the place. So what we've looked at for the last 15 years, as an Underground Railroad descendant, Jamon is a really good, strong historian background on the history that is my family's legacy. The story of freedom and resistance, which is what the Underground Railroad is. That's right. Is considered by historians to be the beginning of civil disobedience in the world. That is the strongest movement towards civil disobedience in the world. And our river, out of the 100,000 approximately escapes that happened using what the network known as the Underground Railroad, now mind you, there were 5 million people enslaved in our country by 1865. Only 100,000 used the Underground Railroad network, though it seems like all these myths abound. But out of the 100,000 that escaped, and I'm talking about into Mexico, Caribbean, into Canada, all the different places that they could go, anywhere between 25 and 30,000 used 32 miles of what a 10-year-old told me, Miss Kim, it's a strait, but we call our Detroit River to find freedom. Think about that. A quarter of the people in this huge story called the Underground Railroad used our river to find freedom. So we're using the backdrop of that story, along with the side stories. The fact that I Have a Dream was said first in Detroit before it was ever said in really? Washington, D.C. Oh, see, I got you. I didn't know that. Somebody. At what was Cobo Hall, now TCF, there are so many firsts. The Great Migration ended at our river because Mr. Ford called people, said, come on up, I'll pay you, okay? He didn't necessarily like everybody he called, but that's okay. We'll say he did create the black middle class. That said, there's so many things about our story that are tied definitely to our river and the larger story, which is the story of freedom and resistance in the world. The United Nations has literally, the UNESCO convention, has been looking for a site tied to the Underground Railroad for the last 7 or 8 years. I've been working on this so long, and I've talked to a lot of the folks in UNESCO and US ICOMOS. They literally begged me about 5 years ago to push this, but we weren't quite ready, but now we are. And this UNESCO site is going to celebrate not just the river itself, but all of us, because we're here for a reason. Our families were driven here for a reason. Yeah. So our story is freedom and resistance. Now it's me and Jamon. We're trying to talk us into, that blue collar attitude we've got. No. We are great people here. We have a great story. Yeah. So
not even just locally. When you talk about the beginning of civil disobedience, I mean, that has a global impact, doesn't it, Jamon? When you're, I mean, still today in recent years around the world, we've seen people rising up in a civil way against their governments and fighting for freedoms. And to understand that that could have started right here is incredible.
Yeah, the abolitionist movement and the Underground Railroad, of course, Detroit being a major part of that movement, is the foundation and the model for the civil rights, suffrage, black power, labor, all of the other later movements borrow heavily from the tactics of the abolitionist movement, particularly the Underground Railroad. Yeah. So Detroit plays a major role in the development of what we would call human rights, civil rights, black power. All of those later movements are borrowing heavily from what happened here in the city of Detroit.
How can we start to change the paradigm? How can everybody start to educate themselves beyond the basic stories that you tend to hear to change that mindset where it's not just a blue-collar city, it's not just Motown or the Underground Railroad, it's such a huge history. How can we start to change everyone's understanding of that?
No, of course the number one thing is to be able to do this in the schools and to reach the largest amount of young people, because people who grew up, like I grew up, a lot of what I teach now and a lot of what Kim talks about now, that wasn't taught in the schools when I was growing up.
And that is exactly why the Detroit River Project created. We did something during COVID, you know, the lockdown. We had to find something to keep us moving. And in 2020, we created a partnership with the University of Michigan School of Education. And we have created a one-of-a-kind international educational curriculum. It's called Along the Fluid Frontier, the Detroit River Project International Educational Curriculum. Yeah, the line, you know, it's this long. However, it is a 7th and 8th grade curriculum intended to be taught in schools on both sides of the international border, because the story of the river is the river with a mirror image. So on each side, we share the same history. However, it's from a different viewpoint. Right. He's on the Canadian side, I'm on the American side. We see the same thing happen, but it's how we take it. That is a curriculum that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world.
Awesome.
We are very proud of it. It is currently in its second pilot stage. We've got, when it starts the 1st of March, again, we piloted last year in March. The 1st of March, we will have 50 educators on both sides of the river. We have 3 school districts in Canada, and we've got a mixture on the American side, like 5 with 2 or 3 educators. We'll have 50. So if you look at that with 20 students, you know, we got about 1,000 kids that are going to get educated about their story. 10 case studies that tells the story of resistance and freedom, known as the Underground Railroad, from the viewpoint of Detroit. But when you start talking about the Detroit heroes, Mary Ann Shadd Cary, the Blackburns, you were talking about heroes that people around the world know. So we've already, people are chomping. UNESCO in June at a meeting in Nova Scotia, at Halifax, Nova Scotia, we were the agenda. The Detroit River Project was the agenda. Wow. And they can't wait to get their hands on this curriculum. But what you have to do is you have to teach our kids and our adults the fact we have to realize that we are more important to other people than we are to ourselves. So we have to bring that self-worth back to us.
Another thing that has to be done, and I do it, but another thing that has to be done is we have to, I do tours. I take people to these historic sites where things happen. Standing in these places where all of this stuff happened, where Martin Luther King Jr. gave the I Have a Dream speech before he gave it in D.C., where Dr. Ocean Sweet defended his home from a white mob, the places where Black Bottom used to exist in Paradise Valley, taking them to those places where Aretha Franklin grew up around the corner from Smokey Robinson. You taking the students and even adults to these places, they begin to say, hey, I grew up in this neighborhood. I lived down the street. I never knew that this happened in my own neighborhood. This history now becomes real to them. It was never real for many people when it was in a book.
Right.
And when it was just in a classroom inside of four walls. But when people can stand in the places where the things happen, and they're from Detroit, or they grew up in Detroit, or they know a little bit about the city of Detroit, and now they're standing in those places, they can put themselves in those places and say, hey, I grew up in this neighborhood, and now they feel ownership of that history.
Yeah. Right.
That has a much more of an effect than sometimes just reading it in the book.
We are running short on time, but real quickly at the end, I just want to talk about that last aspect. When a lot of people are planning out their weekend or planning a trip, being educated, enriching their mind might not be the first thing they think of, but it can have a profound impact. It can be life-changing. What would you say to someone who's thinking, that sounds nice, but I don't necessarily want to be educated right now?
That's right. Well, make it a part of your bigger experience. So you come into the city of Detroit, you're going to go to a football game, or you're going to go to hockey or baseball or basketball game. Just take an hour or two and do a tour of the historical sites in the city of Detroit.
Yeah.
Just you don't have to give up your whole weekend. You don't have to do that, but you can take an hour or two out of that bigger weekend that you're having and learn some of this important history.
And I want to add, please go to DetroitRiverProject.com. We will take $10, $5, or just read the site. If you want to learn about what I've been talking about and sharing our story, as Jamon does on a daily basis, please go to the DetroitRiverProject.com, check out the site, see what you see, and maybe you might even want to buy our book. Our book is A Fluid Frontier. As a matter of fact, he moderated our wonderful kickoff at the Detroit Public Library 6 years ago. It's won awards, but it's a special book itself. It's binational. 6 American, 6 Canadian authors have written it. I'm one of them, and that actually is showcased on the website as well.
Wonderful.
So you want to learn more? Come to the website and check it out.
Absolutely, and we will keep an eye out for that World Heritage designation.
2027.
Okay.
Everybody cross your fingers and toes. You want to join us? Fill out the form on the website, and we'll be happy to have you.
All right, 2027. That'll be incredible.
Yes.
Kimberly and Jamon, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been enlightening.
Thank you.